What's going on, everyone? Welcome to my latest video. This is my review for the 2025 film Empuraan. So Empuraan is a film that I wasn't honestly aware of until last week. What happened was I went to the movies last week and I noticed that there was a lot of people in line, like a lot of people. And I overheard a couple people talking about the film Empuraan, which again, I didn't know what it was. So I looked up the show times and clicked on the theater itself to see, just how much room there is in the theater, like if it's empty, if it's half full, or if it's full. And sure enough, the show times, they were mostly full, like nearly sold out. So it got me curious. I read the premise and I said to myself, yeah, this sounds interesting. I'm going to check it out. So I got tickets for today, which is April 2nd of 2025. And I stumbled across it somewhere, but I learned that this is actually a sequel to the 2019 film Lucifer. I didn't know that. So I immediately tracked it down to see, if I could watch it beforehand. And sure enough, it's on Prime. So I decided to watch it earlier today in preparation. And I'm glad that I did because it gave me some context for this film. Don't get me wrong, I do think Empuraan works on its own. But I do think that, Lucifer gives some context and really enhances some of the character motivations in this film. So I do appreciate that. And I will say this, go into this film as blind as possible because it's an experience. It really is. It's a very entertaining experience. And from frame one, I knew I was in hands of a director that knew what he wanted, executed in a way that was just very entertaining for nearly 3 hours, which is an accomplishment in itself. But you immediately get the motivations of the characters. You know why they want to do what they do. The villain is very villainous. Like right away, you're like, yeah, I really don't like this villain. Will say right away, I usually talk about positives first and then negatives. I will say one of the biggest negatives I personally have is that similar to Lucifer, there's just too many villains. I think the motivations for the villain that we are first introduced in Empuraan is a really good villain, like very interesting. The problem is he's introduced and then we don't really see him until I think it's towards the end of the second act. And it's like, oh yeah, I forgot about him. There's another villain that we are introduced and he is done well enough, but he has the same issue where he's in and out, in and out. So you don't really feel that threat as much per se as if there was, a little bit more screen time for the two main villains. So that's something I just wanted to get out of the way. But the performances are really good. But the biggest positive I have to give this film is the sound mix. The punches in particular, like when people are fighting and they're hitting each other, you feel as if you are in the character shoes that are being hit. It's a very loud film. Like every time there's a punch, you feel it. There were several times where my seats were shaking, and this wasn't even a Dolby or IMAX showing. So that's just to give you an idea how loud this was. And I think that the loudness adds to the immersion, whilst at the same time feels very purposeful from a filmmaking standpoint. And speaking of sound mix, not only did I appreciate the sound mix for the sound effects, I appreciated it for the way that it's scored. Let me explain. The score itself is great, but when you're mixing, a sound design, a lot of times in Hollywood filmmaking, they will have it where the score itself is one of the last tracks. So you don't really hear the score. It's pretty much just supposed to be background noise. And at that point, it's like, why did you hire a composer? But one of the things that I love about Indian cinema is that, for the most part, the score is in the forefront of the sound mix. So you can tell that there is someone that composed this, and not only did they compose it, they put their heart into it. And Empuraan is no different. Like, this is a score that you can tell the composer put their heart into it, and it shows. It's a really, really good score that works wonders with the imagery on the screen, which, speaking of which, I was very impressed with the cinematography. I think the cinematography was top-notch. I loved the color grading. I loved the camera movement, the camera angles. But most importantly, I loved the shadows and the lighting. In particular, there is a scene in the forest. I think it happens about the halfway mark. But there's a scene in the forest. It's very dark. And you see the silhouette of a character. I'm not going to say which character, but you just see the silhouette of them. And the way that it's lit, the shadows, it's really good. And again, there are other scenes like that throughout, but that scene in particular just stood out. It was perfect. The action scenes are great. As I mentioned, they are greatly enhanced because of the sound mix, but the choreography of the action scenes are really good as well. And what's also nice is that there are so many wide angle shots, so you can tell what's going on. You can feel the impacts even more because of that. But there's one scene, one action scene, I think it happens about the hour mark, where they're there are guns ablazing. It involves a convoy. There's guns ablazing. And that scene, I was taken aback because I'm like, this is over the top. But this is what Fast and Furious wants to be so bad, but unfortunately just doesn't have the self awareness, just doesn't have, the swagger that Indian cinema seems to have. Because Indian cinema a lot of times is over the top, but it's done in such a way that feels so earned because you can tell everyone involved is putting their heart into it. You can tell that these aren't paycheck roles. They are people that are really putting everything into it. And it shows, and I really admire that. I feel that, and especially in the action scenes. So I admire that. I also think the themes are very interesting. I think, in particular, the politics of the themes is something that is universal. I mean, for crying out loud, in America, a lot of the themes being tackled in this film are unfortunately going on in America right now. So it's one of those things we're watching. I was like, oh yeah, yep, yeah, that checks out. So it's very well done though. This is a very competent film. But I do have issues. As I mentioned, the whole villain issue, the villain itself, both of them, you feel their motives, but at the same time, they are rather two dimensional. There are some moments of dialogue where it does feel a little either heavy handed or a little too expository. And there are a couple lull moments, I would say, in the second act. But nonetheless, this is a solid film. It does kind of end on a cliffhanger, but it is a cliffhanger that does make you anticipate the next entry. Whilst at the same time, this film does stand on its own, I would argue. I liked it a little bit more than Lucifer. I do think Lucifer is well made. It's definitely worth your time. But I do like Empuraan better. And, that's why I'm personally going to be giving it a. But yeah, guys, let me know your thoughts. Did you like Empuraan? Did you not? Let me know in the comment section down below. I'm very curious to see what the third entry is gonna, foretell. It's one of those things where I'm excited. Don't know when we're gonna get it, but based on when the credits were rolling, it seems like they might have already filmed this already. You guys can in the comment section down below correct me if I'm wrong. Feel free to do so. But I'm very curious to see your thoughts on this film. I'm pretty sure this will probably be on Netflix in a couple months. So if you missed it in theaters, it is a shame because I do think that the theater experience is so nice for this film. I highly recommend supporting this film in theaters, but it probably will be on Netflix in a couple months, so catch it then. And let me know your thoughts on the film in the comment section down below. If you haven't done so already, be sure to follow me on Patreon, Letterboxd, subscription, notification bell, and I will catch you guys later.